Hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Aura Suare formatındaki etkinliğimizin bu dönemki ilk konuşması gerçekleşecek. Konuğumuz Shulamit Bruckstein, Berlin'den, Almanya'dan geldi. Şu anda İstanbul'da Antik Palas'taki Altan Sanat Galerisi'ndeki bir serginin küratörlüğünü yapıyor. Sağ olsun bizi kırmadı. Ve bu akşam House from Letters başlıklı sunumunu gerçekleştirecek. Sayın Sinan Niyazioğlu, İstanbul Mimar Sinan Üniversitesi grafik bölümünde profesör. Bu akşam bu sunumun moderatörlüğünü yapacak. Kendilerine çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Davetimizi kabul edip geldiğiniz için.
Teşekkür ederiz. Sağ olun.
Ben sözü kendilerine bırakıyorum.
İngilizce yapacağız çünkü simultane tercüme yok. Good evening to everyone. I am Sinan Niyazioğlu, graphic design historian and visual culture historian. Today, this evening, I will try to moderate this panel. I should first like to Mr. Yılmaz for his kind invitation to AURA that we will realize this panel. And secondly to Seda Altan, for her generous help during the technical preparations for this panel. And thirdly to you, of course, because today is Friday and just in the rush hour you came here, and thank you very much for your attendance and interest. I am pleased with this Shulamit. It will be my second experience of moderator. As I said, I will try to moderate because for me, Shulamit is not a multidisciplinary artist. She's over-disciplinary artist. She's a professor in philosophy, but her works is too much condensed and multi-layered. So she works in the disciplines of arts, culture, memory, semiotics, symbolism, as well as mysticism. So for decades she has been theoretically and she has realizing curatorial and theoretical projects under the title of Tasvir projects or House of Tasvir. So it really needs time to decipher and understand her work, so I will try to moderate. So unfortunately we are limited with 45 minutes of time. I'm very talkative and she's very talkative, so Seda, I will try to moderate this panel, but if we exceed the time, please warn us, okay? Because after 45-50 minutes, we would like to hear your comments and questions, which are very valuable for us. So thank you again for your participation and attendance. So Shulamit, if you don't mind, before I start our whole interview, so there are two dominant words what I'm listening. Tasvir, which is related with the traditional world, and house is just located in the center. It's very modern. So if you don't mind, I should briefly start with the definition of how you approach Tasvir, and then will be your stage. So Tasvir is a very close word for us, and for me it's a beautiful word. It's original Arabic word which means depiction, and in Turkish we use Tasvir very often, and the word is mostly used in the cultures where it has non-figurative cultures because of religious restrictions, regulations, beliefs, and ideas, like in Judaism and Islam, rather than the figurative descriptions, the text itself takes the role of the images. So the main concept, how the tasvir is being used in these cultures, like in Islam and Judaism, starting from the medieval era, or let's say the traditional world, for the faithful Jews and the Muslims, images were not reliable sources to interpret the reality. For them, images were just like shadows which may appear and disappear, like the allegory of Plato. You know, the people sit in the cave and they see some shadows. They see that this is real, but behind them there is a reality that's going there. So let's say the mortal eye, biological eye, or optical eye does not let us to interpret or touch the reality. So instead of the images, they relied on the text. So the text took the power of the images and they turned as imagery or imaginative. So it actually served a rich playground for the mystics, especially for the Kabbalists and the Sufis, to text both in the content and the morphology of text. So then what we see in the long tradition, this beautiful Jewish calligraphy or the Muslim calligraphy made on fragile paper with black ink or golden dust. So this is how the traditional word tasvir constructs itself and try to negotiate with the reality. But now we have a very, very modern world, which is house. So it became vital, starting from the Industrial Revolution, especially in the moral values of Victorian era to the recent world. The house is dominant, very dominant in our social, economic culture. So the house is mostly embedded with two concepts. One of them is the property. If you own a house, that means you own a space. And I guess the second one is the privacy. So from the literal word, how these two concepts, property and the privacy, evolved from the 19th century, 20th century, and recently postmodern world or after postmodern world. So Shulamit, if we come to two words, the tasvir and the house, is a traditional. So your house is not a domestic house. It doesn't, promote the value, morality, family rules. So it is your house is just like, let's say, a temple, a gallery, or cabinet of curiosities that you construct with letters. So how did all this process started with the playground of text, traditional text, and you constructed your own privacy, your own.
Amazing.
Okay.
1 second. I'm learning. There are too many great things that Sinan is proposing. First of all, thank you very much, and Yilmaz Bey, thank you so much. I find this place amazing already because it's it's a para-university, a kind of off-space university that is in between your college and master's education, and it's so inspiring because it gives you so much freedom actually to choose where to go with something. So I'm actually inspired to do something similar. Maybe there will be a house of taswir that becomes a kind of aura space. So I really love it. I think also we should actually join these like off-space initiatives and houses of learning, which this definitely is, should combine their forces, so to speak. So I'm really honored to be invited, Yilmaz Bey. Thank you so much, thank you for being here so numerously. I have immediately comments, and I have now three choices: either to take up your proposition to discuss the house, or to show you the film of taswir. We did an exhibition 10 years ago in the Martin Gropiusbau, now exactly 10 years ago, which really sort of, you could understand in a 4 minutes film what this taswir concept meant to me then, and then you understand with my propositions what I'm doing with it now. And the third thing would be just to leave everything and talk about the house that is an open space. Maybe one thing, house in Hebrew, bayit, so means both house, but it also is the second letter of the alphabet, because the alphabet has the word bet in it, which is bayit, which is house. So the alphabet is the alpha,
in
and the bet, and of course the bet, the house, is the door. Okay, so we just talked about it. So, and also the bet, if you would draw the bet is the house, right? Is the second letter of the alphabet. It is open. It's close to the right-hand side, and it's open to the left. And since the script goes from right to left, that means you start with the protected space, and then the opening sort of goes into the direction of the text. Why of the text? Because any text starts on the right-hand side. You write from right to left, either Arabic or Hebrew, right, or Farsi. So this kind of gist, if there's a bet in the beginning, it's made like this. It has a line above, a line on the right, and a line on the bottom, and it's open to the left. So that means, for example, the Holy Scripture starts, of course, with this letter, it's logical. I mean, what is logic? But it's a kind of semiotic logic, and it starts with Be for Bereshit, in the beginning. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning is close to the right, close to the bottom, close to the up, and it's sort of open to the left, which is in the direction of what's going to be written. So it means it's open towards that which is coming, because the text is never finished. I mean, our text is not finished yet. It's like life. Life and text is the same for the ancient scholars. So that's one thing about the bet, about the house. That's very important. It's of course a non-domestic house because it's open into the direction of your own writing. I mean, all of you have their own projects, so you are actually writing out of this bet. The bet is your beginning, in a way, any one of us. This is an interesting comment on on the house as a bet or bite. But maybe I do show you.
Auseinandersetzung zwischen Künstlern leistet, die sich begegnen. Nicht also die brisante Ost-West-Gemengelage oder ein angeblicher Kampf der Kulturen interessiert uns hier. Es geht vielmehr darum, festgefahrene Begriffe und Klischees zu lösen, neue Berührungen zu stiften, Korrespondenzen herzustellen, die nicht offenkundig sind und verloren zu gehen drohen.
It is a great honor and pleasure for me to welcome you, all of you, to the opening of this exhibition, Taswir, Pictorial Mappings of Modernity in Islam. Mehr als 50 Künstler und ein gutes Dutzend Autoren aus mehr als 22 Ländern haben sich auf dieses künstlerische und kuratorische Experiment eingelassen, das Joachim Sartorius sehr treffend als eine Versuchsanordnung zum Bildbegriff Taswir beschrieben hat. Taswir heißt im Arabischen, Persischen, Osmanisch-Türkischen, Urdu und Hindi Bild, bebildern, abbilden, sich ein Bild machen, fotografieren. Wir haben diesen Begriff Taswir zum Ausgangspunkt genommen, um klassische islamische Bildwelten aus vielseitigen zeitgenössischen Perspektiven zu beleuchten. Dabei haben wir jegliche regionale, nationale, ethnische oder religiöse Zuordnung hinter uns gelassen und stattdessen einen Parcours entworfen, der ganz bestimmten Fragestellungen folgt. Fragestellungen, die der Hamburger Kunsthistoriker Aby Warburg vielleicht Pathosformeln genannt hätte. Menschliche Gesten und Ausdrucksformen, die zeiten- und ortsübergreifend sind und eine Nähe zwischen den Objekten herzustellen erlauben, die wir so vielleicht nicht gewohnt sind. So entsteht in 18 thematisch geordneten Räumen eine kosmopolitische Schlüsselerzählung, die von bildnerischen, literarischen und akustischen Objekten gleichermaßen getragen wird. Raumzitate dienen als Wegbegleiter durch einen assoziativ gestalteten Parcours, der vorwärts und rückwärts gleichermaßen zu verstehen und zu begehen ist. Bewusst legt diese Versuchsanordnung ihre Subjektivität offen und zeigt eine flüchtige und frei assoziierte Ansicht der Dinge. Die einzelnen Räume lassen Objekte aus völlig verschiedenen Zeiten und Orten in Zusammenhänge treten, die präzise definiert wurden, aber dennoch fragmentär komplementarisch gemeint sind. Vor allem möchten wir mit dieser Ausstellung die unendliche Offenheit und für viele von Ihnen vielleicht überraschende Verknüpfbarkeit der klassischen Objekte zeigen, die die islamische Kunst nur zu oft in historischen Ordnungen von Ost und West, Europa und der Orient, Moderne und Islam festgehalten hat. Der Ausstellungsparcours folgt also ganz bewusst einer subjektiven und allinearen Assoziation der Dinge, für die der Kurator Sarat Maharaj den Begriff der poetischen Dokumentation geprägt hat.
Okay. I mean, I showed you this film. I forgot, first of all, that I spoke.
It's based on the most comprehensive.
This is Walid Raj. This is Walid Raj speaking. But
I compiled this list in 2002. I was convinced then, and more so today.
It's very interesting, but never mind.
To me by author.
Do you want to see it? It's Walid Raj.
Yeah.
Okay. No. All right. Can you see it? Yeah. Good. So I actually showed you this because first I forgot that it was all in German, and then I wanted to take certain references in my presentation that you have something visual to associate with it. Because what was special in the exhibition maybe that it connected many layers of time, so there was a very non-linear way of telling a story, and then there was a way of sort of overlapping venues also, and cities and places. So there was a double overlay of time to the surface of the contemporary presentation, and of course of places, both at once, in a very subjective or poetic alliteration almost. So how does a curator from Berlin come to all these Islamic and traditional and ancient sources in the middle of Berlin? So this is something sort of I wanted to tell you, and to be open with my own like personal reasons to do things, because if you choose to do something, you should tap into the most personal often, like in your own work. So it took me some time to figure out what it was, but I think if you look, I come from a German Jewish background, so if you look at an ancient text like this one, for example, this is a very classical text, 5th century text. It's the Talmud, like the rabbinic central text. And what interests me in it is its architecture, actually. It has a very interesting architecture of the page. And why do I take it as a beginning, a starting point? Because what I always loved about it, I lived a long time in Jerusalem and studied with a very eminent Talmudic teacher for many years. So what I loved about it was the way the scholars, the rabbis, actually they go from the margin to the center, from the periphery to the center. They would never start at the center. They always go sort of from outside in. It's as if to take the periphery more important than the center. And the central text is actually so dense and has so many layers and so many times, like that it's not easy to access. You have to study it with a great effort. You don't do it by yourself, you do it with a partner. And this partner you have often for many years. So you deal with this central text of the Mishnah or the Talmud for many years, and you do it, the two of you, and the kind of friendship learning that is called Chavuta actually produces the commentary. That means you, in your communication,
reading each other.
You're
reading text, exactly. But you're reading each other.
You're reading the
like
text
Sufis.
And you read each other, and by sort of engaging in this very personal thing that the text is there, but you have to open it up. You create yourself the commentary, and then the commentary of course, there are famous commentaries like this of the 11th century, of the 13th century, of the 15th century, so the page would overflow. I mean, if it's an architecture, it could not be contained. If it's a house, it would have overflowing borders. So this is something that always interested me, the kind of open borders of ancient text like this. It has no end. It also has no finished page, and it's always produced in the contemporariness or the contemporaneity of the people who are actually discussing it. So this is something, of course, that cannot be contained in a state, for example. Once you have a state that has borders, which we have now, right? So this kind of overflow, of course, cannot be contained. So it means I felt in a way that this kind of diasporic teaching could not survive the territorialization of a state. Okay, so this is one predicament.
Okay,
then,
so
yes.
There is a very talkative God or divine then with the believers. Okay.
I mean, we always it's like you have to recreate it any minute, sort of from scratch.
Okay.
This is the thing. You have to recreate whatever the divinity is, and divinity in the Jewish tradition here, which is very close to the Muslim tradition, is basically creativity, because the only thing we know about the divine is that it's the creator. This is the only thing, and there's a whole long theology tradition, very interesting, 10th century, 13th century, to deny this God anything but creativity. Why? Because we should not there should be no finitude of God. There should be no finite thing about this. So you don't throw your ideas on this God. The only thing you know, He created this world because the world is there. We didn't do it ourselves. Right? So the kind of creativity that you need to read the central text is like an imitatio Dei of this creative act. That means we are recreating the situation in an artistic act, actually, anytime anew. It doesn't matter if you're building a house, or if you're drawing something, or if you actually, through a speech act, remedy a certain situation. I mean, it could also be maybe lovemaking, whatever it is. Yes. So
kind of meshk.
Yes, it's meshk. So that means this structure, which how do you study it? You study it like this. You see,
the action.
This is very interesting, beautiful photo, because it's three guys. I call it the three Talmudic guys. They sit in the middle of Jerusalem. They're probably Armenian, or it's an Armenian photographer taking these Yemenites maybe. And they're studying exactly that text you just saw. They're studying exactly that text, and you can see that they study it sort of in a physical gesture, body gesture, from all sides, because they have only one book. So they read it upside down, they read it from the left, they read it from the right, and they study together. You can see it. It's a communication scene. What did you want to say? please.
No, I don't want to add anything. Just
Please.
So the paper turns in a space, in a mental space, and show the other image. That
Yes.
it's emblematic now.
This one?
Yes, very.
Yeah, this is really like now the tragedy sets in. I mean, we all know that the 20th century built a state for this tradition. We all know it. Okay, it's in the Middle East. We all know what state it is. It's territory instead of overflowing margin. How can you contain an overflowing text in a territorial state with the army to defend the borders, etc.? One cannot. I mean, there's a lot of Talmud schools in that country, but in principle, I was always disturbed, thought, no, it cannot. Then this work here is a work by now, listen carefully, it's a very interesting story, by an artist in Amsterdam, who's the grandson of the last great rabbi of Baghdad. Okay. So Baghdad until the 50s had a very famous Beit Midrash, like madrasa, led by this chief rabbi of Baghdad who refused to go to Palestine because he was faithful to Baghdad. And
the Babylonian
also,
wisdom, yes.
exactly, Baghdad, of course, as the Babylonian center, was the center of the Jewish world. Why? Because the Talmud, which we just saw, which is the text for the rabbinic scholars, was produced in Baghdad. So it means the center of the Jewish world was Baghdad. So this Rav had 5 kids. The kids left for Palestine, and the grandson, Yosef Sasson Sema, left for Amsterdam. So this work is a work by Yosef Sasson Tzemach, which is using the Talmud, and sort of in order to say that this kind of openness is no longer there, he's taking these oil stuff and he's sort of turning the texts into an opaque blackness. So that you actually say you can no longer study it, it's no longer available, and all you have is lines of flight, like escape. You sort of have the in-betweens, in between, and it's very geometrical. I mean, it could be Mondrian. Yeah, it's also floor plan, actually, how you organize a space. I find this extremely interesting, and I showed it in the Taswir exhibition. Like here, you saw the film. You can imagine.
Pages of Talmud.
Yes, these are the pages of Psachim. When Pesach is all about freedom and escape, and you liberate yourself, etc., from anything that binds you. And so this was a whole wall of these blackened Talmudic pages. So it means I came to the question, how do you think an ancient text as an exhibition floor plan? Why? Because I love this open margin thing, and I saw it lost. I thought there could be no way of going back to tradition with it. Why? Because tradition is in a way occupied. By what? By ideologies.
Yes, by ideologies, by the mass education system that makes us to dictate the action of reading, because all the practices of action of reading changed. Firstly, it became silent.
So exactly.
You learn to read and write silently.
There's no more way to read it traditionally, because all the text itself has been in a way hijacked.
Sure, and the relation between book and the reader, there was a pedagogical and the material relation starting from the primary school that you have to.
Right.
And this is something very, let's say, secular and hygienic, and it's a very typical Victorian era.
So I started to get interested in it as an architectural setting. So I thought, okay, this is the text again. If you don't study it traditionally, maybe one should learn how it's the espace, the kind of space that it is. How do you create a floor plan or a kind of exhibition space that's exactly made like this? I mean, where the center is left open, or like so many layered that it becomes opaque. And the center, the margin, is where you actually move, where things happen, where things are being produced, etc. So you can see my notebook of this Taswir exhibition, sort of imitating this ancient text. You see on the left, this was spontaneously done, as I didn't know I would ever show it. But it's like this. You see on the right-hand side is the floor plan of my rooms, and then I sort of you can see that wherever I did something with this Talmudic energy, I always felt like it's sort of exuberant. Yeah, it goes beyond its own borders. So then I saw things in the surrealist tradition. This is Max Ernst on Tempel. Tempel was a mathematician, and Max Ernst and this mathematician Tempel were interested in problems that had no solution. For example, spiral clouds and spiral Nebel, which is fog. Yes. Spiral fogs and their sort of physics, and they came to certain mathematical questions that were connected to the infinite and to things that had no apparent solution. So Max Ernst, for this temple, which is also funny because it's also the Holy of Holies temple, here it's the name of the mathematician, Max Ernst invented a typography of letters, which were no letters, in order to prevent people from reading.
So artificial codes, let's say codes.
Because he thought this infinite thing, this problem of infinity, shouldn't have a solution ready, and he wanted to prevent people from thinking they understand anything.
Secret code.
So he created a semantic code that prevents you from reading. And of course there's a whole dignity of illegible signs. Why? Because anything legible is immediately calls for action, is very ideological, and everything that sort of is worth your effort to dedicate yourself to it, maybe even your life, should not be immediately accessible. Maybe it's secretive.
It's some sort of acceptance, I guess, no?
Yes, but it's also a kind of it's to say there is an infinite effort in figuring this out. It's not done with one interpretation, not with two, not with 10. Maybe you need infinite interpretations to figure this out. So it's an open-ended, it's like the margin that has no end. So I got very interested in illegible texts, and I found them, of course, in the literature. Roland Barthes says for a text to be called holy, it must be illegible. And then I slowly sort of went back into the, what you call taswir. I thought the letters are so horribly violated by terrible readings. I mean, the readings are the problems, not the. So I thought, where are actually? This is another example for. I should have switched it around for an architecture, because this is also the same thing. It's a hadith, like 13th century hadith. In the middle, you have the text, whatever it is. Okay. It's by chance. It's on sexual relations and what's forbidden, what's allowed in love.
And these are interpretations and other regulations added in 300 years of time, I guess.
Exactly. This is the interpretations, and I love the way, if you're no longer now into the content of things, for the reasons we said, but into the architecture of it, you see that the letter sort of seeks its way into the in-betweens wherever there's space. So they really flow like water. You can see it. They flow into where they are actually want to get in. So I found this extremely inspiring for my own, I translated it into a contemporary setting, obviously. So you can see this from the exhibition that I'm showing just now, the Wednesday Society. This is its central wall, and you can still see the same structure. I'm still sticking to it. Right, so we have 4 texts that are the margins, and it interprets a center that is actually, really in this case, illegible. It's a Merit Oppenheim. It's called a snake spiral in square. It's a snake spiral in square. So that's one thing of taswir when it turns into letters.
About this, okay.
Now we come to the images. This was all about the letters.
Yes, but I guess the images that you will share are not the images. I can describe them as, could you possibly show them as Aby Warburg?
So this is
I define them as emblems. Emblems.
Yes.
Because they have got special roles to remember, to interpret, and to believe in, or to remember something. And so, for me, these are not the images. They are the emblems of memory.
Okay. True.
And it actually constructs a new language. It's a kind of Solomon's, bird language. So what Aby Warburg did, so he had to choose something like 300 or 400 images in order to construct this diaspora and the intellectual.
Does everyone in the room remember the Warburg project? Otherwise, I would present it very quickly.
Aby Warburg.
Aby Warburg.
Aby Warburg. 1920.
You can do it.
Okay. Please. No, please, you tell it. Okay.
Aby Warburg is this art historian, Jewish art historian in the 1920s in Hamburg.
Yes,
and he happens to, this family story is very interesting. I'll tell it briefly because he's the younger son of the Warburg Bank. No, he's the older son. He's the older son of the Warburg Bank. And he's about to inherit the bank. In the 1920s, within 5 years, he created a library of 60,000 works, maybe 70,000. And he was interested in connecting modernity to the Renaissance and the Hellenistic times, and actually to show how modernity is decided, how it actually approaches antiquity. That modernity sort of is whoever has modernity sort of has to relate to antiquity in a certain way. And he introduced also the 10th century Arabic sources, and he introduced the indigenous sources, and he said it's not enough with books, we need artworks. So he included a whole visual grammar into his way of structuring and researching the relationship between contemporary, modern, and ancient traditions. So he included the visual material.
Experiences of humanity through
visual images.
Yes, so they're emblems.
So, and he created, he created these kind of, how you say that? Tafeln, they're boards, and he had over 30 of them, and he actually was interested in different themes, like gestures, like love or victory or defeat, and then he would sort of have a grammar of visual images around these themes, and these themes he called pathos gestures because they were connected to feelings and human gestures. So this is very, very similar, I feel, to the page, to the architecture of this page we saw, because it's always it's a circular movement. He switched the images also. We took something that he saw yesterday in a newspaper and he related it to an ancient sculpture, if it had to do with a certain gesture, and then he would rearrange the images. And this rearranging the images I found so interesting, because when he rearranged the images, he rearranged the relationships, of course, between the objects and also the library. So they would, every evening, they had a diary of the library, they would say they would rearrange the objects, they rearranged the books, and therefore rearranged antiquity. Which of course makes sense. I mean, you rearrange things backward. So this became another inspiration for me. He calls it das Schieben der Gestelle, that means the rearrangement of the placements, of the settings, exactly. Right. Okay, so that means what kind of performance does follow from this? This is now we know how to arrange things, so we don't do it in squares. We do it in a way that one thing comments upon the other, that you find your way from the periphery to the center, that you follow a way of reading inside your space that is going in between the objects. You have many perspectives for one object, a multi-evocative object maybe. One object can evoke many directions. And so what kind of, that's the architecture of it, but what kind of performance does follow? Now it's the theme of a performance. So if you have a place like this is the Martin Gropiusbau with abstract, with 18 huge rooms and one large Lichthof atrium. So the things that you see there are all objects. So all the objects in their relationship to one another, they raise many questions. You can have so many questions from the relationships between things. And there's not only objects, there are paintings, there are sound objects, there are texts, there are fragments, there are poetry. So the way you relate one to the other is one curriculum after the other, you see? And they are way beyond any kind of fixed faculty, because the way you go, you create your own paths, and then the connections you build are sometimes very subjective. So it means I learned.
A cabinet of curiosities. I mean, you turn the ritual as a performance, and the object defines a new value, a new meaning. This is what.
I mean, the objects are all evocative objects.
Yes.
So they evoke questions, and then you have material, and you create your own pool of knowledge in a way, your own curriculum. That, like this place, I mean, in this place you can do that, for example. And so I thought, for every one of my exhibitions from then on, I quit the university. I mean, the usual normal university. I didn't want to no longer be a professor. I wanted my own playground. And I built, in every exhibition I did, I kind of created my own university. I mean, in a way. So it's very ephemeral. It never lasted long. But I always had the table in the middle, and then I invited scholars and artists, etc. It's always the same thing, but the house is always like not mine. Yeah, I enter a museum, I do an exhibition. After 3 months, my university is kaput. I mean, then I have to rebuild it. And so this was when Oleg Rabar, Zichrono Levacha, blessed memory, was still alive. And this was on the concept of taswir. But this is what I did yesterday. This is Beral Madra teaching in my exhibition now in Artam. So when you come to see Merit Oppenheim in my exhibition that I'm doing now, please come. It's really worth coming. Merit Oppenheim, Rebecca Horn, Natalia Yankoshvili in Artam Souterrain, completely transformed space. I would love to have you, really. So this is Beral Madra teaching in my university, non-university, right, which becomes a place of learning for one evening. And I realized that the conversation between two is the origin of like the scholars that told you they're studying it too. Do we have a curriculum when you speak with someone very intensely in a very dense conversation, very personal? There's a whole agenda coming from it. So I always combine the table for the scholars with this conversation of the two. And I did this 10 years ago, and this was yesterday. Yes, so this is Yeshiva. So you see that I came closer together. Maybe I like the feminine conversation. Who knows? There's a couch. Right? So the couch, of course, has 1,000 associations. So this is something I think is very important. And then, of course, the objects. This was like my floor plan for the Taswir exhibition. I started with one citation for every room. And then the citation was the hinge for the objects, right? Okay, so it means if you would talk not about performance, but about grammar, then there are kind of prototypes that this could be. Because you talked about the house, that it's not a domestic house.
Sure.
It's not a domestic house. It's a house of study. It's a dream text. Because if you remember, some of you, please, if you don't reread, go read Freud's 6th and 7th chapter of the interpretation of dreams. Because if you're architecture students, it's an amazing architectural way he explains how the dream is laid out. Like the dream elements are all dispersed in the space, and they actually come up to the surface. And then sort of they don't know before and after, they don't know time, and they don't know yes or no. So it means you learn how to arrange a space with elements in it that are actually free from contradiction, which is really, really interesting. So dream text is always an architectural inspiration. Sure. The ancient text, obviously, it could be an exhibition, it could be a book. So this kind of architecture can lay itself out in many ways. I call it diasporic thinking, of course. So this was something I did it can be done directly on the walls. It can be a mural. You see here I put the ancient text directly in Çanakkale Biennial on the walls. So it means you are now inside the book. The space becomes the book.
Yes, the books turns into temples turns into like human.
And this was also, again, this thing that retreats, because Çanakkale had 50 languages in 1915, and Beral Madra curated this under the headline, "Only the Dead Have Seen the End of War." That means this was 100 years, 1915, and I put poetry on the walls in the languages, in 11 languages that had withdrawn from the city without translation, to actually sort of show you what has disappeared. So the reader couldn't read it. And here you see the book I did, where you have that kind of structure inside the book. You can see just that the pages of the book repeat the same kind of architecture that you see on the walls, like center and margins. Then this is maybe too much for now, but for architecture students it's definitely interesting. It's a Atlas erwirbt, where this rearranging of the margins becomes a principle of how to digitally access an archive of artwork. Maybe I can show you, because that would be interesting for the very end of it. So you have certain themes like architecture, faces, meine kleine Mnemosyne, letters, etc. Then I have a way of calling one object from its margin to the center. For example, this one. This is Raziye Kubat. It will move into the center, and then all the other objects will sort of rearrange themselves in this cosmos according to the closeness or distance they have to this one object. Because I've before, out of my gut, so to speak, attribute this object. There are 200 attributes, and I attribute 10 to each, but I do it unconsciously. Of course, the algorithm remembers the way I attribute them, and then if things overlap more or less, then closeness and distance is remembered for the object. That means now I have a thing here that is called Walid Rad, reflections and shadows. So this reflections and shadows sort of move into the middle. Then I want to see in close-up of this, so I get the same thing as the page. So the page, the ancient page, I can always read from margin to center. You see, I go my way and I read from outside in, and I sort of can go wherever I want from outside in. I will have a million ways of going sort of from one object to another, and I can really study it. It's like, and the atlas would suggest, this is Chanakal again, would suggest always like relations I have forgotten or I haven't thought about. It's not something that you would sort of produce a question then look for the answer. It's the opposite. You get a relationship and you forgot why was it connected, so you get openings. You get one open thing after the other. It's like, wow, how does it work? So you always get questions instead of answers. It's like
you get a subconscious message of what your thought trail was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, so it's going from answer to question, like the rabbis, from answer to question. So you don't.
So I got my answer while I was trying to ask you a question. I get it. So, and my last question, I mean, when I look, and when maybe we look at your works projects are not closed, they're kind of organic. When you finish a project, it opens a door and creates a new question for the previous one, and there's always biological and spiritual relation between each project, like the divine creation process, you know. How do you do it? Is it coincidentally happens because you don't produce by your own? You produce with your friends, and you don't decide the place. I mean, you're not like a rigid architect or designer. I will design, I will make this, I will, you know, because there is...
I mean, this current exhibition, which is called Wednesday Society, not by chance, it's a feminized version of Freud's Wednesday Society. Wednesday Society, the couch of Merit-O, the Koltuk of Merit Oppenheim. And what here really, I did it quite consciously, I have to admit, because there's a very, very interesting apparatus of speaking and writing in this exhibition. There's a couch. I invite usually female protagonists on my couch to talk to them about anything. It has no beginning. It's a carte blanche. I talk to them. And then you see here on the left side, you see an apparatus of a scribe. I call it scribe. So someone is sitting there. He can't hear exactly what we're talking, only like bits and pieces, like helpless. He cannot do a surveillance piece. So, but he or she, the scribe, will write while we speak. And it's very loud in the exhibition. And it's a writing that produces a mural immediately. I mean, this wall has a mural textile, a wallpaper. And this apparat there, when the scribe is sitting and writing, she produces an ongoing text. And this text is being produced in the exhibition, like in the ancient text, is this whole simultaneity of the commentator producing the margin. So we are producing the margin inside the exhibition, sort of going out of the exhibition, because of course it has its own future. So this is probably the craziest thing I did with this thing, consciously putting a time tunnel. It's like a time tunnel into the exhibition, because it's sort of, and when there's no scribe, you can hear it because we have a loop. So it's like it's writing the whole time. Yeah. So come and see. Really, I invite you to come to this Merodoppenheim exhibition. Merodoppenheim is in Istanbul. I mean, in my exhibition.
Yes, district, yeah.
And you're very, very welcome to see it. So you're right, I built time tunnels into the exhibition. This is, you can see it in Facebook. We have a Taswir project. It's called, Instagram, it's called House of Taswir. And then Taswir.org is the page.
And now questions, please, and comments.
Yeah, if you want to know what we're doing, come here and leave your, newsletters. Yes, comments.
Yes, comments and questions.
I will. I'm always the one who's asking the questions.
What's your name?
I'm Jale.
Jale.
Very happy to meet you.
Same.
I'm also one of the founders of AURA.
Wow.
So I'm very happy that you are in our home with us. It makes it even more special. We were talking with my very precious friend Özlem, who's an extraordinary writer also, and how your actual experiences have taken each one of us in very different ways. She didn't stop taking notes throughout your speech. She's going to be talking to you later on, hopefully, but I was amazed at your connection between languages, religions, also time, and interestingly enough, your way of expression is very visual, so you don't even need languages to understand what's going on, which I found fantastic. I'm always very interested by communication through music, and also body language, color, spatial connections, and when people can really communicate sometimes without speaking the same language, or be it by not being from the same country or religion. I'm the daughter of a diplomat, so most of my life traveling around and adapting to strange places, meeting wonderful people, strange and beautiful places. So you took me on a trail through my childhood and my crazy life, so I thank you for it. It's been fantastic. I really time traveled, and it was really wonderful to discover this new way of communication. Beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, Jale, thank you. So much. If you come, I'm really happy.
I will.
So
you should sit on that couch with a feminine talk.
Right. It's only 8 days, and just 1 week, and come afterwards. And please, be my guest, both of you or all of you. It's like,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So how did it start, actually? Were you like this when you were a child?
It's funny because I think this overstepping, that to sort of go outside the boundary, maybe that was something like a child. I feel like I have a playground, actually. I feel like I'm playing.
Yes, I can see your excitement.
It's playing, and I don't want to be disturbed when I play. So they call it work because I'm workaholic, but I'm actually playing. So this kind of playfulness has to do with trying out how it could work if the wall is not there or the boundary is not there. And then I became a professor for philosophy, and I couldn't keep the playground because there were certain things that were not exactly forbidden, but in the connection with the Jewish tradition were like too much put in territories, very much in territories. So I love the open playfulness of the Jewish tradition. So I quit the university because it confined me in a way to subscribe to certain territorial habits of thinking, whatever. And I was a long time in Jerusalem, a long time. So I'm a Middle Easterner looking like a German or whatever. So it means but the boundaries are doubly enforced there. Yeah, so it means I actually try to free the playfulness of the tradition. So the diasporic of it, the kind of.
I mean, from the outside, and I'm very. I'm not knowledgeable enough to talk about religion in the big sense, but looking at it from the outside, actually Jewish religion seems very square and kind of restricted. But what I also think quite often about our work in creation, I believe in this extraordinary God which is very creative, as you talked about, without. And I find he's got a great sense of, he or she has a great sense of humor. I find this energy very playful as well. But I also find that creative people have this, as it's spoken of in religion, this very almost godly quality to them of creating things that are not actually existing.
What is so interesting, I think, when you speak, I mean, what I love about this kind of materiality of the text is basically its creativity and not the religion in it. It's very interesting. So I would not think that I'm doing anything with the religion, but actually with the way the letters actually combine with one another. And then I started about 15 years ago to switch letters for artworks. This is why you maybe caught this visual thing in it, because I thought the letters are too much occupied by obvious interpretations that are also very disastrous. So I started to switch letters for objects and letters for contemporary artworks, hoping and trusting that the readability wouldn't be so fast. So, I mean, which is obvious. If you have contemporary artists, the more intelligent they are, I mean, I love them then, the more the meaning of it withdraws from you, and you need a time to figure it out. The more time you need, the better maybe the work is. Who knows? I mean, it's not obvious in your face. So this is how I sort of transferred the playground from the textual to the more visual. To me, it's just the same.
It's its own mystic way of sort of leaping through. It's like this magic smell that you smell in the street and you don't know where it comes from and you follow it.
And it's basically very strictly. I mean, that's why I said reread. Maybe if you didn't, it's the architecture of dreams.
Sure.
Because the dreams are very precise. You dream something because of some suppressed other thing. So there you have your trail. You go sort of follow what is on the surface, and the surface transports something that's not on the surface. So there you have your deep time already. So and in language also, of course in language also, because one thing you say, another thing you don't say. One thing you see, the other thing that's behind it you don't see. So you go like, you have to meander. And then when you have the meandering, you have the flaneur. And when you have the flaneur, you have the Walter Benjamin, and then you have the city and the way you explore the city, and then you go behind, you go behind anything.
So there are two items, not fully logic. There's a trust, love, and patience maybe. I mean, because, yes, all narrators during the Judaism, because you are in the heart of it, but the problematics that your intellectual trying to sorting out is not the only problem. It's the problematics of all intellectuals and the mystics.
But of course, there's nothing Jewish about it.
Sure.
Right? So I mean, it's Merettenheim, Rebecca Hahn, it's Natilla Yankushvili.
Yes, the kind of a voyage, or the being heimat knows in your own culture to be good. It's also the same in all mystics, same in Sufism also, but the aesthetic form, ontologic form that you create, you actually got
maybe it's something to not be at home.
Sure.
Like sort of the I'm not homeness.
Garib.
And then you sort of,
the Sufis and always, then to be garib, because you have to be awake and your intellectual life should work,
detached.
Sure.
And then you have to,
then you be the observer and the observed.
And what is the sort of, when you come to a place like this, you sort of, the only thing that you're maybe a bit exposed is that you so easily want to find something to celebrate that it's like a home. So you find this a home, then it's 3 hours a home, then you go to this, you think, wow, beautiful. So you go sort of from one shelter, in a way, intellectually, to another. And that means, that gives you maybe the power to recognize how things are overlapping. You see, that's maybe a strength. You can see that one text is like another artwork, and that this artwork is like that book, and that book looks like your own whatever. So you learn, when you're not really deeply attached, you learn to see the substitution of one thing for the other. That means you learn not to judge by territory. This may be something interesting. You stop judging by territory.
It's also interesting that when you remove one element, the whole structure of the thoughts and the arithmetics of it change the whole concept, both visual and also in terms of intellectual content. Also, it's really very today's presentation, which I found quite extraordinary.
Yes. I don't know if this is a question or not, but this thought kept coming to me while you were showing, especially when they rearranged things. Right. Like if I were to walk in this room, I might be the person to notice the redness of that poster on behind. And then is it kind of like thinking then the whole room could rearrange because I were to notice that first, and maybe the next person could notice the black, and then everything would be arranged accordingly. That was the thought that kept coming to me. And one other thing is, I know this has maybe nothing to do with it, but could AI be relevant in this thought process? Or
I mean, interestingly, because the AI would probably look the same, look very similar, but would be the exact opposite, really. Why? Because this is a very humane thing for me. It's like an anti-Google in a way. It's a counter-Google, because Google does exactly that, to take a few attributes, I think 40 they have, and they arrange it according to closeness and distance, and you get your suggestion, but for commercial reasons. So with me, I actually, different than AI, because AI has no human agent, I actually attribute from a very deep sense of desire, maybe. So maybe, I don't know what way I would do this. If it's not red, maybe I would call it phallic, maybe I would call it humorous, maybe I would give it names that are sort of, I don't know what I would do with it.
But they should come to the gallery and they should decide.
But I would do it from my unconscious, very humaneness, of course. And so it means the way the things arrange itself are very subjective. So it looks maybe AI-ish, but it's the opposite. It's interesting.
It came as a question, and while everything was going on, I kind of, it's not like challenging, but it was a question that popped up, so I just wanted to express that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, of course. It's very similar in the way it looks. And probably that's maybe a problem that could be, yes, it's, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Hi.
I think it's not a question, I'm just brainstorming. I'm Ayının. I'm working as a part-time instructor at the District University and University of Finance University. Your speech inspired me thinking again about the ultimate calligraphy tradition in a way, because when ultimate royal scribe wants to create a text, he decides and look back to the old stuff. That's what they call Luce. And Luce is the word comes from the initial, and initial means construction. So it made me think again. All texts refer as some kind of construction.
Yes.
Because
there are many ways of constructions. This is what. So all pedagogically, politically, socially, and ideologically got in the very, very Western way of, and it's very moral. You know, it always keeps you silent. It pretends you feel independent. So there are many ways of reading. Like you saw the three rabbis imitating, interpreting the picture, three in different forms. Focus on one book. And,
but I think what Aydin, yes, is saying is interesting, because in the ancient world, different than in the European invention of modernity, there is a certain dignity to the measurement of objective form. And of course the Ottoman calligraphy has exactly that measurement. You have fourths, you have thirds, you have way of sort of, it's a whole, and they are not to be negotiated. That means there's a certain integrity to the objective measurement, like we know that in our tradition.
So she's also saying the same thing.
That's what I meant. It's very interesting. It's very interesting because the subjectivity has not proven to be, or the original author, or all these European sort of like superiority ideas have not proven to be really improving our human condition, really. So this is sometimes I think to go back to the integrity of the object and its measurement is really something interesting. And I'm not the only one. I mean,
maybe it's a way of pre-modern thinking.
I mean, then of course the next problem is whether you enter when you go to traditional calligraphy is what I said with this tradition, that it enters readability. We cannot do interesting things with traditional stuff so much, except so we would have to rescue what you said, the measurement of the letter, and transport it somehow into an unknown material field. Yeah, so like I did with the text into the exhibition architecture. But it's interesting to think about it. Yeah, that letters have measurements.
So mainly, rather than to show a mirror, you actually present a kaleidoscope to see different perspective and you have understanding. This is what I got so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to ask some questions, but I'm not fully about this sure. You are generally talking about the writing, which is starting from the left side or right to the left. But if the writing changes through the vertical or the radial, how it's going to turn into the space and how it can be affect our visual experience through the letters?
It was only a commentary on the word house. Of course, I mean, when you come to the exhibition, I would love you to come.
Actually,
is Merit Oppenheim? Okay, so you saw that. Of course, I don't have my glasses.
Your speech.
I'm so sorry, I don't.
But
I
there
have
is the answer of your question.
What's your name? What's your name? Büşra. Okay, so because you saw the snake poems by Merit Oppenheim, she writes in spirals, right? So you saw the letter, the poetry thread by the poetess, which is an invented artist, a kind of imaginary artist. She starts from the left. So it means what I said is only about the house. In Hebrew, it's the letter bet. So that's only one example of one letter. You can forget about it. It's just one. Yeah, of course we can write in spirals. We can write from left to right. We can write from down to we can write any way we want. We can write with bodies. That maybe it's lovemaking. Who knows? We can.
I just wonder, have you ever think about this kind of places when it comes together? Different writing style. Maybe it's like
Chinese to Korean or Arabic.
Or like Dada. I mean, Dada used all directions. Dada is interesting because they had no center and they used poetry, visual poetry in any direction. So, yeah, right. Dada is interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you very much for this invitation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's really a pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. Zaman çok hoştu.
Oh. Wow. Oh, I'm so proud. So, I get a certificate. You must. Oh, wow. Look at this. I get a certificate from AURA.
Center. Our names are in the center.
But it's only after 1 hour. Okay.